to another episode of Gossip Finance. My name is Alicia Singer.
And I'm Duncan Sandlin. How's everybody today? Today we're just going to talk about real quick Social Security. We're not going to go into detail on Social Security. We're just going to talk about it with the upcoming election because there's a lot of stuff going on with how the Republicans are proposing changes to Social Security. And just to get us started, I'm going to start with a little clip here from the Majority Report with Sam Cedar, and they're going to go over this Obama talking about this on the stump.
Comment on this first because we got a couple of things to say about this, but understand that Democrats came to this a little bit late. The leaders in the Republican Party, both in the House and in the Senate, have talked about their plan to use the debt ceiling, which is coming up. I don't know, maybe in December, is it? Maybe or. Use the debt ceiling as a way to insist that we cut Social Security and Medicare in the form of the age in which you're eligible to get it. And maybe also just some other back-end cuts on cost of living increases, which is a cut, right? I mean, you're working all your life. You anticipate that you can retire early, get a little bit less of a payout at age 62, let's say, or maybe you're going to wait until 65, you get your full payout. Maybe you're going to wait till you're 67, get a little bump on it. Whatever it is, they want to push those ages higher, and it's a cut. And this is something they can do with Joe Biden in office, because the debt ceiling would be catastrophic if it is not raised, because we've already spent the money.
And in fact, they would prefer to do it with Joe Biden in office, frankly, because then if it was a Republican president, they wouldn't have to own it.
100%. Yes, great point. And here is Barack Obama. Finally, somebody's out there talking about it.
You don't need a tax break. But no, he fought for this. And then his adult children bought not one, not two, but 3 private planes. Because apparently carpooling was not an option.
Oh, pause it. He's talking about Ron Johnson here. We should be clear. And this is good. This is important. They need to get that vote out in Wisconsin.
A plane, then you don't need a tax break. But no, he fought for this. And then his adult children bought not one, not two, but 3 private planes. Because apparently carpooling was not an option. Now, I mean...
To be honest, it is more convenient to have 3 than 1.
Meanwhile, Senator Johnson voted to raise the retirement age to 70. Supported a plan that would put Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block every single year. Each year you'd have to vote to renew this thing. I mean, think about it, because Washington works so well. You want your Social Security and Medicare reliant on Congress every year. He's called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. Said that it's candy that the left is giving away. The point is, some of you here are on Social Security. Some of your parents are on Social Security. Some of your grandparents are on Social Security. You know why they have Social Security? Because they worked for it. They worked hard jobs for it. They had chapped hands for it.
So, I just want to do that part of it. I don't want to get too in the weeds with that. But here's the good point. So Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, he proposed it back 2014 or 2015, cutting Social Security. So the way his proposal initially back then was he wanted to move the minimum retirement age up to 70. Right?
Okay, well, Duncan, right now, if people don't take their Social Security until they're 70, they basically get a bump, right? They end up, that's like a bonus. They get a higher check, right? So that would just be the threshold for the normal check.
So right now, you can take your Social Security at 62. There are limitations to that. You can take it at full retirement age. If you're born after 1960, that's 67 years old. Right? So anybody over 62 or 62 or younger, right? Can retire full at 67, and that way you get your full amount. At 62, you get a reduced amount. If you wait till 70, you get an sort of an inflated amount. Under Johnson's plan, 70 would be the middle age that you would do it.
The full retirement
age, but
right.
It's not clear that there would be an earlier or later option. And even then, they would reduce the amount by reducing the amount that it would grow each year, what they call the COLA, right? The cost of living adjustment. So they'd reduce that. They reduce it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's two reductions, right? The cost of living increase becomes problematic, but then also there becomes the issue of if you delay, you don't get the percentage increase to your check. Because
Not
right
necessary.
now there's a benefit for people deciding to delay taking it because they get a check, but that seems like at least it's revealed whether it's in the cards or not.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't want to get too into the weeds with what Social Security is because we don't have that kind of time today for this. But we can do another video where we get into what all that looks like. But then the thing to understand is the idea was to cut the amount people would get and to make it you couldn't get it till you're older, right? This new plan that they have adds an extra feature where if they use the debt ceiling, so essentially every year you have to vote to raise the debt, right? Now this is money we've already basically borrowed as the government, right? So the government owes this money. So it used to be that the debt ceiling was a pro forma thing. It'd just be raised and we'd just pay the debt. And that's part of what makes us so powerful as a country is we're the only country in the world that's never failed to pay a debt on time. That's why our money is so valuable. That's why everything's tacked to the US dollar, right? If you delay that, it downgrades the value of the US dollar. And it can damage world currencies because now there isn't a reliable currency to tack to, right? So this is incredibly dangerous to do. So the idea is, as the Republicans, we're going to threaten to do that if we take the House, unless we get some concessions. Now, when Obama was president, they did do that before, and that was when it first happened. I think it was like 2012 or 13 was the first time they really did it. And I don't know if you guys remember that. You can look it up. They shut down the government for like a week or 2 weeks. And it was, And Obama had Biden go past the Speaker of the House, who was Harry Reid at the time, or I think it was the minority speaker. And they went to Mitch McConnell and said, okay, we'll agree to reduce Social Security for the debt ceiling. And Mitch McConnell turned it down, not because he didn't want to do it, but because he couldn't be seen as agreeing with Obama on anything. So we lucked out because he was so afraid of the Tea Party at the time, which are now the MAGA nutbags, that if, I can't agree with the first black president because then I'll lose all my voters in, rural Kentucky, right? So even though it's something he really wanted and he could blame it on Obama, he couldn't take it at the time. So we dodged a bullet. Now they're saying since Biden did that back then, they were kind of making the point that he might do that now. Now he's already said he's not going to, so hopefully he sticks to that. But we'll see how that goes. Now, I do like that, stand-up comedy Obama's kind of coming back. Just want to see him like up there on stage. What about airplane food? What's up with that? Anything else? Anyways. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I love Obama. I really do. So I know we're not political. I'm just gonna throw it there, but I just like it. But
be a little political.
He does a lot of Bill Clinton's mannerisms.
Yeah. Hillary, I gotta tell you. So anyway, so that's kind of the immediate threat, and we'll get into a little bit more what the current plan is, because it is Ron Johnson and Rick Scott. So Ron Johnson again, but I want to do another clip here with Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks, and she's going to elaborate on this a little bit more by looking at what the Fox 5 say. What did the Fox say?
Especially the show The Five, made a mistake that they usually don't make. They had a Democrat on who made a good point about, Republicans and their endless efforts to gut social spending programs, including Social Security and Medicare. Now, these are programs that poll very well, not just among Democratic voters, but also Republican voters, which is why Republicans have failed time and time again in doing away with Social Security or privatizing Social Security or cutting Social Security. But nonetheless,
I want to make a point on that. When she points that out, yeah, it's if you go across the board, over 70% of Americans, more people support Social Security than abortion or affirmative action or you name it, school lunches. Fluorescent light bulbs don't even have as many supporters.
Let's just be honest here. It's really tough to say that you're going to be against something that you probably have a family member that is dependent on.
Yeah.
Democrat or Republican, I'm sorry, I challenge you, show me an average middle class family, or not even middle class, that doesn't have somebody in their family that's, largely dependent on Social Security for their retirement.
Right. And you figure 65 million Americans. Right. That's like 1 in 5.5 people. You're walking down the street, you see 4 other people. One of you probably has Social Security or is collecting, right? Just statistically. But the bottom line is that doesn't just cover old people. It covers people with disabilities. It covers widowers and widows. It does a lot of other things, right? And then Medicaid and Medicare are attached to it too. So it's a big deal. And so if you're talking about cutting it, we all pay into it, right? So to say, well, we're going to cut what you get back, it's like, it's an insurance program is what it is. But if you paid into your insurance and the insurance company said, we decided we're going to reduce the benefit that you've been paying into for however many years, some people decades, you'd be a little pissed off. I mean, I'm just saying.
Right. Especially because you think that you're buying an insurance policy that's going to pay you XYZ amount, and you're going to pay XYZ amount for it every month, and you sort of feel like you've got a bargain there,
Right.
So Social Security is a very similarly structured program.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I would be absolutely livid if my insurance company said, oh, that policy that you bought that was, $250,000, like, we're thinking 175.
Yeah. Yeah, not after years. You'd be livid, right?
I'd be livid.
But that's what the Republicans are trying to do. So this is why we're bringing it up, because it's important, because most people are going to the voting booths because it's the elections this coming Tuesday, and they don't realize that that's what they're voting for, is to cut their Social Security. Right? So to be political, I will be political on this one. If you're voting for a Republican, you're voting to cut your Social Security. That is just a fact at this point.
Yeah, I really don't want anyone doing that.
But that's what's happening right now. That's why we've I know we're slow, guys, because we're still new at this. This is only episode 5 for us, so we're a little slow, but we're getting there. We're getting there. But anyway, she's gonna jump into this a little more. But I want you to watch. This is Fox News, the Fox 5. This is what the conservatives actually think.
All right, so this is Fox.
What was that?
This is the Fox Fab 5.
The Fox 5. Right.
Look at this interaction between Jessica Tarlov.
Have you ever seen this show before, Lace?
No, I I don't think so.
Okay, let me just give you a breakdown. So the Fox 5, it's 4 conservatives, and they have 1 Democrat that they yell at.
So basically, they've chosen their one lefty that they just pummel over and over again.
Right. It's 4 bullies, and
I hope that they pay that lefty really well to sit and take that.
no, the problem is a lot of times she makes good points, and then they have to cut her off. So,
And Jesse Waters.
watch this.
And the one thing that he hit that I do not understand, right, is at the core of the Democratic message is what happens if Rick Scott's plan goes into effect to Medicare and Social Security. And you should all, it's about a 1.5-minute clip of him talking about Social Security and how people in Wisconsin work their whole lives to get that money. And that if Republicans get into office, they're going to means test things. They're going to scale back entitlements that you've worked for. And I do not know why Democrats aren't leading with that.
Can I ask you,
Because it doesn't work.
Can I ask you a serious question? What Republican president recently has attacked and gone after and reduced Social Security?
No one has been able
No one.
to.
Right.
But that
How
doesn't
many
mean that it
Republican
isn't a
presidents
plan.
have we had in the last 50 years? We've had quite a lot, but they've never actually done what they're always being accused of.
Is it in Rick Scott's plan? In his commitment
The
to
one
America?
Republican in the entire Senate, yes. The one.
So Duncan, did they represent this accurately?
Well,
Like,
I mean, in the sense, did any Republican president pull it off? No. But
did they have it a part of their plan?
well, Trump definitely was considering doing it in his second term. There was definitely a lot of discussion about that. The last president, like I said, Obama, was willing to do it for the debt ceiling. Not because he wanted to, but for the debt ceiling. George W. Bush, in his second term, tried to privatize Social Security, which would have essentially destroyed it. Which would have meant instead of getting it from the government and getting it guaranteed by the federal government, you'd have to go to a private insurance company. A little bit like the student loan thing we went through not too recently, right? And then this goes all the way back to Reagan. And Reagan wanted to make Social Security totally voluntary, which would have essentially destroyed it. Because rich people wouldn't want to do it. So they wouldn't have to pay into it. Right? And there'd be a lot of poor people who wouldn't want to do it because they'd want the extra money. And so it would eventually it would have just destroyed the program. So I want to understand this too with the Republicans on this. I read an article recently. I wish I'd have clipped it. I'll try and find it and put it down there. But basically, they brought in all these people, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, whatever, right? And they told them, yeah, this is what the Republicans have proposed. And almost none of the people believed it. They're like, oh, no, they'd never cut Social Security. No. And they were all wrong. So she made a good point, the girl in the Fox 5, I forget her name, which is, yeah, this is what the Democrats should have been leading with for the last 2 months, is these people want to take away your Social Security. They want to cut it, right? And it puts it into a position where every 5 years, all federal conditions like this, all laws that are federal laws that are conditions like this, have to be revoted on. So Social Security would have to be revoted on to continue every 5 years. And if the Republicans were in power, they wouldn't have to vote against it. All they'd have to do is refuse to vote. And Social Security would be canceled. If their proposal goes through. Fortunately, right now, for that proposal to go through, Biden would have to sign off on it. He still has veto power.
And he would clearly never do this.
Boy, I would hope so. Because I want you to understand why this happened in the first place. So, back in the 20s and 30s, America moved from a primarily transactional contract sort of situation for most people, right?
Okay, so pause. When you say a transactional contract situation, what does that mean? Define this for us.
That means I would go work for Lacey, right? Or Lacey's, and I'd say, okay, I'll go work at your bar or your ranch or whatever it is.
Bar, and it's a very cool bar.
Yeah. Okay. And we would make a contract between the two of us, and she would agree to pay me X amount, right? And I would agree to do X amount of labor.
Yeah.
But we would have to personally negotiate that contract, right? We moved into the industrial era. It moved from that sort of situation to a wage situation where Lacey owns a factory, and instead of a
we own a factory now.
Okay.
Fine.
So instead of the kind of an individual contract that we negotiate, it's no, this is the wage I'm paying. I'm paying you this per day or this per hour, right? Whatever it is.
This job now pays blank dollars per blank.
Right. This caused a lot of problems in unions and whatnot. But then what happened was people got older and they got sick or they couldn't work. And if you're barely making enough to survive to begin with on a wage, which is what most people were back in those days, especially in the cities, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, right? That's really difficult. And so now you had a lot of these people in their late 50s, 60s who can't earn a living, have no savings, and there's no real support. So they would literally go to what are called poorhouses. A lot of them were just abandoned buildings. And these people would basically just go there to die. And this would be your mom, your dad, grandma, and grandpa. And that would happen. Millions of people were living like that in the 30s. So that was where Social Security came from. The idea was let's set up a program to make sure that these people have some sort of insurance in old age. It wasn't so they could retire on a chateau. It was just enough so they wouldn't starve on the street, right? It was very, very minimum, very, very basic. And so it's part of the reason the initial retirement age was set at 66, because back when they first did it, and whatever it was, 38 or 40, whenever the first check went out, life expectancy was 66. So it didn't pay everybody, it just paid people who ended up living longer so they wouldn't die on the street, right? So that's essentially what that whole process was. And what it became is it became a bigger deal, and it moved into trust funds. And one was the old age insurance. If I live too long and I can't afford to live, I paid into this. It pays me until I die, right? So it runs like an annuity, essentially. You get a monthly check until the day you die, right? Then they added what's called disability insurance. And this was a big deal because it covered people who were blind, which was really common after World War II. You get a lot of guys coming back that were blind. It covered people with basic disabilities who couldn't work or could do minimum work or only work part-time because they physically couldn't. And that was a big deal. It also covered children with disabilities, right? So if I'm insured, my children could get Social Security disability, right? This is a huge deal because even today, 1 in 5 children under 18 require some sort of disability or educational help. About 20% at some point between being born and being 18. And disability insurance covers a lot of them. So it's a huge deal, right? To cover making sure they get the education they can function without mom and dad going broke. And 1 in 33 children are born with some sort of disability. So this covers a lot of people. This also then included not just old age insurance, disability, but spousal. So if I die, my wife can collect my Social Security. So it provides insurance to her if she happened to be like a 50s wife, and that was the deal. We lived in the 50s, and she stayed at home, and I worked because it was hard for women to get jobs back then. Right? So now she's covered. So if I die, my wife can at least get Social Security so she doesn't have to go live on the street, right? And this continues today with spousal insurance. So there's a lot of factors to it. And then, of course, they added Medicare and Medicaid to this, right? So now if you're old, you get Medicare when you're 65. Everybody gets it when you're 65. Now you at least some of your medical stuff is paid for, and you can get additional medical insurance for a much reduced cost. So like today, if you were 64 and getting insurance all by yourself because you didn't qualify for Medicaid, you were a year too young, right? A 64-year-old guy who was in decent health would probably still be paying $1,800 a month for an insurance plan. But once he's 65 and qualifies for Medicare, he gets Medicare, then he can buy the extra parts to Medicare, B, C, and D, and his medical insurance would go down to like $150 a month. So these, just to go back to it, yes. So old age insurance, disability insurance, spousal insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, right? All covered under
partridge in a pear tree.
Yep, all covered under Social Security. So kind of a big deal. So 65 million Americans use Social Security. I mean, are collecting on it, right? So it's a big deal, and probably like I think it was like 15% roughly of those people. That's over 90% of their income. Right. So you're talking about 10 plus million people would go into instant deprivating poverty. I mean, we'd literally be throwing 10 million people out on the street into the poorhouse. So it is a very important thing. Now, here's the deal. Up until the 80s, everybody paid in, and then Social Security kind of paid out, but it didn't really keep much of a balance. I mean, there was some balance here and there. It wasn't a big deal, but pretty much
there wasn't a reserve tank. There wasn't a savings account per se.
Right. Pretty much what went in went out. LBJ made some changes to that, but then what happened was in the 80s they realized the baby boomers, which was the largest generation, right? They were going to end up eating so much out of this that the younger generation, because they were only on average, were going to probably be having 1 or 2 kids instead of 5 or 6 like their parents, right? They were going to have to pay for some of their retirement through Social Security, right? So they raised the rates on it under Reagan, with Greenspan and whatnot, and they created a surplus in what's called a trust fund, and they did it for old age insurance and disability, right? Old age insurance being the bigger one. So the trust fund grew, and the government has borrowed money from it and paid it back, and blah blah blah, and it's gone back and forth. We can go into the hypocrisy and corruption behind that stuff some other time, but that's a different, funner history lesson. The thing to understand is
under history lesson. I'm an English teacher. I'm definitely
call
you funner. Sure.
Yeah. When we actually go in depth to Social Security, I'll give you guys the 5-minute talk about how corrupt things got. Anyway, right now
doing that episode.
Yeah. So anyway, right now the trust fund as of today stands at about 2.9 trillion. So that's extra money, right? Now, if we do nothing, we don't do anything about Social Security going forward, the trust fund will be gone by 2034. Okay, so 12 years from now. Closer to 13 now because we're getting near 2023. Now, at the time that's gone and depleted, the amount of payroll tax coming in, the amount of money people are paying each year going in, will still cover about 80%. Okay, but people's pay would be reduced by 20% because the money wouldn't be there unless the government stepped in. There are solutions to this. I think the most obvious one right now is everybody who pays Social Security, which is almost all of us, right? It's whatever, 6.2% of your paycheck, right? Of your payroll. And once you hit $147,000 a year, every dollar above that is not subject to Social Security tax. So you could raise that, or I would just take it away, right? So every dollar you make is subject to Social Security tax, and then you'd never ever have to worry about funding it. It would always be funded. In fact, it would be overfunded. You could probably just loan money to the government at that point as an extra tax. So that would be a simple solution. The Republicans, on the other hand, this is their solution, going back to Ron Johnson and Rick Scott. All right. So their plan to keep it solvent would be to reduce all the future benefits with no tax hikes. Right? We're just going to reduce the amount people get going forward. That's just the bullet point of it. So what they do is they try to shift the money from those who earn more to those who earn a little bit less. So if you are on the lower income scale, you know, your cut will be 10 or 12%. But if you're on the higher income scale, it'll be like closer to 40 or 44. Right? But
okay, so I'm going to chime in here. So logic says to me that the play there is that in these lower income brackets, there are more people to spread this across, right? So we can make up more ground that way. However, you're also looking at within this group of people, there are more people. However, the impact is much greater because that percentage of money taken out of your, your monthly budget becomes way more critical than at the higher income levels.
Sure,
Am I thinking about this?
Sort of. But let's look at this in reality for a second. So, about the average payout for Social Security is about $2,600 for somebody who's maxed out, right? So, hang on. So you would be losing from your $2,600. That'd be $312 a month. That would be $3,700 a year, right? And from your total of $2,600 would only be $31,000. So now you're down to 27 something, 28. That's devastating if that's what you're living on.
Well, and that's a big difference in those income levels.
But that's my point, is if you're a higher...
I'm saying that I've lived at those income levels, and that size of a swing would have made a tremendous difference in my world in either direction, to the positive or negative, depending which way it went, you know?
Right. But if I'm rich and I'm withdrawing $250,000 a year out of my pension and my 401k and all that, then do I really care if they're cutting my Social Security by half? So now I'm, instead of $2,600, I'm only getting $1,500. It's like, it doesn't matter to me anyway. It's not that big of a swing. So really what it ends up hurting poor people more. Which is
poor tax, kind of a poor tax, basically.
Well, no, we've already taxed you. You've already paid this. We're just going to take it away from you now.
No, but that's what I mean when I say a poor tax. I'm not being incredibly literal.
Yeah.
But, that's who it's going for. It's going for the poor, and there's a larger quantity of people in these lower income brackets, so they, feel like they can kind of spread it around and extract what they need. But it's also the people that are going to be injured the most,
Right. And from just a financial perspective, I would counter with this, which is, when it comes,
let me not be laughing at you first.
When it comes to middle and lower middle income people and lower income people, for every dollar they receive in something like Social Security or stimulus, they tend to spend a little bit more than $1, right? For wealthy people, right, people that are higher middle income, upper middle income, they tend to, for every dollar they get like Social Security or something like that, they tend to spend about 70 cents. So that's less money going into the economy. It's less money going to provide jobs, to provide services. It's just generally bad. So if we're cutting 12% from people we know we're going to spend it, and we're not doing anything to improve the economy. What we're doing is shrinking the economy. And when you're talking about 10 million people rely on it, 65 million people collect it, and the overall of this, it's going to be, we're talking, 30, 40, 50 million people are going to have less to spend. It's going to be devastating to the economy. So that would be the financial counter argument to that. So, did you have anything you wanted to throw in there?
No.
Okay. I'm going to jump into this last bit with yours and my favorite.
Oh, here we go. Okay, so I don't know. I'm feeling like I might need to predict what's going to happen here.
Okay, well, let's do this first. First, this is another cage match. Dun dun dun. All right.
So
ringside commentary.
Duncan versus Dave with yours truly as the ringside commentator. We'll see if I can predict it. We'll see if you can beat it.
Maybe I can win. You never know. I have already seen this before, so I have a slight advantage.
Okay, I have not seen this. I did not watch this clip, so I'm going to give my prediction totally cold.
Totally cold. So he's going to do guys calling in about Social Security. Are you ready to rumble?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Tracy's with us in Billings, Montana. Hi, Tracy. Welcome to the Dave Ramsey Show.
Dave.
What's up?
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Sure.
I'm 61 years old, and I keep getting these letters from Social Security wanting to know what I want to do. And, I'm still working.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on baby step 7.
Mm-hmm.
I am married.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know. When is the best time to take advantage of that fantastic program?
I sense sarcasm, Tracy.
You would sense correct.
Well, I mean, the trick to knowing when to take Social Security is to know when you're going to die. And once you got that.
Okay. So, Tracy from Billings, Montana, 61, still working, married. He's on baby step 7, so no debt.
He
has no debt.
He has no debt, which includes also the house. We're not just talking consumer debt. He also doesn't have debt on his home either.
No personal debt.
No personal debt, fully funded emergency savings, and he's living and giving like nobody else.
And he wants to know what he should do because he can collect it. He can file for it next year. What should he do? And Dave has made a good point. It is a good point. The only way you can really predict how much you're going to get in Social Security is if you know when you're going to die. That's true. But that's any sort of annuity, which Social Security is.
You know what? That is true, and that is an honest to God sort of the Russian roulette of that whole thing, right? And choosing when to take it is because you are sort of guessing on your own health and mortality and.
Well, not entirely, and I'll get into that in a second. But let's see if Dave picks up on it first. Go ahead.
I might have my own commentary about that, but I think I'll wait because it might be more pertinent later.
All right.
So I already have a little bit of a prediction, but I don't know if I should make it now or if I should wait. But I have my ringside commentary.
You want to give it another minute, or are you ready to go?
So, well, since I haven't seen this clip, I'm not sure the best time is. So I'm going to say right now, I'm going to give what I think is about to happen right now. So at some point in here, I believe that Dave is going to say that he should take it at 62 as early as possible.
Okay.
That's my prediction. Dave has a leaning toward taking it at 62 as early as possible. He thinks it's a terrible program, and he thinks that you should extract what you can as soon as humanly possible. Even though it might be the lower paycheck, he has a little bit of a tendency to say, yank it out as soon as you can.
Okay, let's see what he says.
Yep.
That'll get out. Then you can calculate it precisely. Okay. Obviously, the longer you live, the better it is mathematically to take it later, because you're going to get a bigger check for a longer period of time. Okay.
Can I throw something else in there?
Sure.
I was actually intending to, I don't need it, so I was intending to invest 100% of it. However, then I found out that I don't get the full amount if I start early. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right, you don't. And the later you start, whether.
All right. Now we've added a caveat. The caveat is he wants to take it early and invest the money. What do you think Dave's going to say?
Commentary. I think Dave goes for that all day long.
Can I tell you why Dave is 100% wrong?
Well, no, you can't, because we have to hear what Dave says first.
Okay. I'll tell you why I'll tell you why.
Duncan, you have to let him be wrong before you can tell us why he's wrong.
He's trying to use his third eye on this one, and it's not going to happen.
Hey, you know what? I have a very in tune third eye. Thank you very much.
Well, no, Dave thinks he's an X-Man and he can like shoot lasers or something. That's what this move is going to be.
Okay. All right, fine. Different third eye. Here we go.
62 all the way up to 70. The later you start, every year you would get more. Okay. But if you run some math out, you can actually run the calculations on their site. It's fairly easy to do. If you run the math out in your situation and you say, okay, I could take it at 66 or 67 and I would get this amount. Okay. And if I took it at 62, I'm going to get a different amount, X versus Y. You follow me? And the difference in those could be made up almost every time. You can run the numbers on it by taking every dollar from 62 to 66 that you get and put it in a good investment. The investment returns will give you greater than the difference for the rest of your life. Almost every time. So it usually makes sense to take it early if you're going to do what you're going to do, which is invest every bit of it and let it run. Now, taxation comes into play when you're still working. All those other things come into play. You got to look at that and figure out how much you're actually going to net, fooling around with whether you're going to make it taxable by your income and all that garbage. But aside from that, the basic concept is that you can get a better rate of return than they will pay you by waiting, so that you take the total amount between that 4 years of X number of dollars a month into a good mutual fund. Will then, from the rest of your life, that one account will make you more than enough to cover up the difference between your 66 account and your 62 account.
Okay.
Oh, that was so predictable.
Yes, you call it. Take it out and invest it. Now.
Yep. All day long he's going to do that. He hates that program.
Oh, yeah.
He will tell members of the clergy that they should not pay into it because they actually technically can get an exemption for it. He will tell them that.
And some civil servants can too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, they always regret it later, but yeah.
And he'll make that recommendation. The points that he cites, I won't even say they're necessarily terrible points, but this is assuming people on their own are going to be able to save enough 100% completely on their own devices. And I want that to be true, but if I can have.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news. No, all of his points are terrible points. And I know you're not.
It's nicer than you are, Duncan. I feel like that just might be a thing. I don't know.
No, it's a fact. So, I know you don't know the Social Security as well as I do, but.
Well, you know what? I'm not a Social Security idiot. I'm just saying.
No, I know. But you would know the guys.
You can always have your strategy plan 20 years before you need it, right?
Yeah, but I've applied for Social Security like over 200 times for clients. So I am very familiar with how this works. Right now, if you make more than $560 a year, right? at 62, if you make more than that and you're still working, right, they reduce the Social Security by $1 out of every $2 you make over that. So essentially, right, if this guy's still working and he tries to collect Social Security at 62, he can file for it, but they won't let him collect it until he's A, either not working, or B, full retirement age at 67, not 66, like Dave said. So he can't even touch this money unless he quits his job. So the idea that he could take this money and invest it, not while he's working. And since he doesn't need it, it's probably because he's still planning on working. So he can't even take the money to invest it. So to talk about taking and investing in it, what it's going to do, it's a totally meaningless thing to discuss. It's like, it would be like me discussing, where I want to take my honeymoon with Amelia Clark. See, here we are going on our honeymoon. That's our graphics budget, by the way, for the month.
You just revealed how much money is in our non-existent joint bank account. And
hey, but I got to live the fantasy for about 3 seconds there, so
For about seconds, I feel like that was the opportunity to tell people where they can send us money or something. But
yeah, we can. Yeah, well, we don't have that set up yet, so
we don't even have that. We're so low budget. We don't even have for you to send.
We're not begging for cash yet. We'll get there.
Someday we hope we can beg you all for cash.
Right.
But we're not doing that right now. Right now, we're doing this for fun and free.
Right.
Whatever that's about.
But the odds that this guy can collect Social Security at 62 and still work are less than me marrying Amelia Clark. I'm just saying. I have better odds.
Crap on a cracker, man. You've already got like nothing.
Yeah, I know. His is impossible. Mine's just incredibly improbable.
Am I supposed to be nicer to you than that?
No, I'm just saying she could get hit in the head or or have a mental breakdown and then be like, oh yeah, that guy. Anything could happen. In his case, can't even happen. So, not saying that Amelia Clark, she had some medical problems, so I don't want to get on her. I didn't want to. Yeah. No, she's a wonderful actress. I'm just making a joke about probabilities here. It is probable I run into her and she falls in love with me. It's not likely. I wouldn't even put it in the realm of remotely possible, but it's not impossible, which is this guy's situation. That's how I want to phrase that.
So your odds are better than impossible.
Yeah, my 1 in a gajillion are better than his 0 in a gajillion.
Well, that's optimism here on Gossip Finance.
Well, that's reality in math worlds. So let's do this little fun thing. So let's say, hypothetically, he can get the money and save it, right? Just to show kind of where Dave's coming from here on this. And he can do that, and I'm engaged to Amelia Clark. So everybody's getting what they want in this scenario. So
what do I want in this scenario? I'm not.
All right, okay. I'm just saying for the average person, he would get. I'm just going to do average, right? Average person gets about $1,700 a month at full retirement age of 67. Okay, right now. Okay, and anyone born after 1960. So if he took it at 62, he'd be getting $1,300 because he took it early, right? Because he took it 5 years earlier, right? And then you have to factor in the cost of living adjustment. I'd assume 2%, which is kind of low because I think it's 6% this year because of inflation. But I just assume 2 to make it easy, right? Mm-hmm. So if he took that $1,300 a month with the 2%, cost of living increase for 5 years, he could save, adjusting for that, about $81,000, right? And so if I assume that his Social Security, according to Social Security, his life expectancy is about 84, right, for a male. So he would have that money for 17 years. Okay? Now, I'm going to say he took that money, and I'm going to use Dave. Dave likes to assume 12% interest, right, on an investment, which is ridiculous because the last 20 years, the market return on the S&P is about 7.5. But, you know, Dave likes to tell you he gets 12 every year. So I'm going to give Dave the benefit of the doubt and say 12. So if he'd have done that for 5 years and invested it, he'd have $115,011 after 5 years. Okay? And if he took that money and he still got 12% going forward for the next 17 years he spent it, he'd have $1,346 a month, or $274,584 total over the 17 years. Just by taking it early and investing it, which was Dave's recommendation, right? Which, you know, Social Security at 67, if he'd have waited till 67 and taken it, the Social Security increase would have been only $131,000. So yeah, Dave's right. He'd have been a lot better taking it and investing it over 17 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is he's probably not going to get that return. With old people, you definitely don't want to, especially people withdrawing money, you don't want to put them in high risk investments like the market. So in reality, his return's probably closer to 5. It's actually probably closer to 3 or 4, because you're trying to protect his money. You don't want to put him in high risk. You want to.
But my little Dave predictor would say Dave would not dial down that risk factor. He would keep them in the market.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And I'm going to get into why that's psychotic here in a second. Yeah.
We just want to throw out there that, like,
yeah,
this philosophical difference that is key here is that Dave would say not to dial down the risk factor. My opinion is to each their own, but like understand what, you know, that means that you're doing, and don't let somebody put you on some sort of autopilot thing like that. If you're going to stay in the market, make sure you really understand what that means.
Sure. So let me just finish this real quick, and then so if I'm going to assume 67, the actual 10-year average return would be close to 5 on a portfolio for somebody that age. He'd have saved, instead of $115,000 with investment on his 5%, he'd have saved $94,000, which means instead of $1,346, he'd be getting $695 a month, which would be closer to $141,774, which still is better than the $131,000 he'd get from Social Security. But the Social Security is guaranteed and is backed by the federal government, as opposed to the investment, which could go either way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's why it is so crazy to sit there and go, let's stay in the market and stay in the high-risk investment when you're older, right? And this becomes an issue when you start withdrawing. So I started this graph here that I'm going to do. It's 2 graphs. And I picked 2 couples. One couple that invested over the last 17 years, because that's from retirement to average death, right? So they started investing in whatever it was, 2007 or 2006, right? To today, right? And they had $150,000 to invest, and they invested it in the market, in the S&P 500, right? And I took each year's return for 17 years, right? To show you what they'd have at the end. And then what I did was I took each year's return and I flipped it upside down and did it backwards. I inverted it. And couple two got the inverted investments per year, starting with this year going backwards. So if you take that, couple one over here, if they actually followed Dave's plan in 2006 and started investing, and they had 150,000, put it in the market, and they needed to withdraw 12,000 a year in retirement, so 1,000 a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
By year 17, they'd be almost 12,000 in the hole. And by year 16, they'd have been out of money. They'd have been in the hole. But couple two invested, and they did it backwards. I just flipped the numbers. Same situation, 150,000, took out 12,000. But the market was better earlier on than it was here, right? So by the end, they still have $144,000. So just to show you, couple one invested in 2006, followed Dave's plan, and their retirement savings was gone before year 16. Couple two follows Dave's plan, but we did it in reverse from the years, where the market was good the first few years while they were withdrawing the money. And they did really well, and actually they were up for a while until the market went down again, and they ended up still with about the same amount of money. Exact same. The only difference is, what was the market doing?
Mm-hmm.
So this idea that, okay, I'm going to put my client in and have them invest in the market when they're in their 60s, and they need to start withdrawing that money at some point. And I'm just going to trust that I can, predict the future? Oh, I know what the market's going to do 3 years from now. No, you're going to put them in something much, much more secure. Something that's not going to be as risky. That's not going to track with the market. And the reason you're going to do that is because as they're withdrawing that money, they don't run out of money quickly. Because if the market is bad for a couple of years while they're withdrawing money, they're selling low and they're getting screwed. But Dave doesn't consider any of that. And that's why that's insane. We'll get more into that in the next video when we talk about investing strategies and how that works. Because it's different when you're putting money in versus when you're pulling money out.
I think that would be a really fun probably multiple shows to do the putting in versus taking out sort of philosophy, because we spent many, many years sort of working on the philosophy of putting in, and then the taking out kind of eludes us. And actually, there's really not always enough guidance and education around how you're supposed to go about that part.
Yeah, there's generic strategies about how to do that are probably the smart move most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, typically what most financial advisors would do. Is as you got older, they would try to squeeze the risk down, right? Because they don't want your portfolio to fluctuate up and down as much. So, like for example, the S&P 500 has a volatility, what we call standard deviation, of 15%. So right now, average return is 7.5. Now that means if the standard deviation is 15%, that means in a good year it could be up. Statistically likely to be up around 22.5%, or it could easily be down, that 15% from 7. So whatever that is, I haven't figured it out. 7.5, 15. So down 7%. And that would be a statistically normal year. You could either lose 7 or be up 22 or anywhere in between. But that's really volatile. Now, if I had an average 7.5% return and I could squeeze that to a risk factor of, say, a standard deviation of 5%, Well, that means at any given year, my client could be up 12.5, or they could be up 2.5. But it's a lot safer if they're withdrawing money. And over the long run, you statistically tend to make more money in down years. Make a lot more money because it's harder to make up money than it is. Right?
Totally true.
Yeah.
Completely.
So let's run through the last of this little rant because he says some other stupid things here. I want to close up. But I think, real quick, for the cage match, I think that's a win. Because he didn't know the guy probably wasn't going to get it, A, and B, didn't understand the risk of investing it.
All right, and so we don't count mine as wins or losses, but I'm going to count mine. I'm going to put it in the win column because
predictability. You called it. Take it early and invest it.
I was absolutely able to predict what he would say. Right now, I think I'm 2 for 2.
Oh, I'm 3 for 3 now.
Oh, yeah. We had your one off of, so put you in,
3 for 3.
Well, we're both at 100% right now. Let's see if we can keep this up. I don't know.
Undefeated.
That payment amount, that's what it amounts to. Plus, when you die, that money that's in that mutual fund is part of your estate. When you die with Social Security, nothing. That's what you get. So that's what you get, like you said.
That's a
worried about family. I don't know if anyone in my family subscribed to us anyway yet, Duncan, actually. But family, if you're subscribing, I love you. I really do. But you're not really what I'm thinking about in terms of the whole Social Security thing, or not. I'm not thinking, oh, geez, when I die, I can't leave this as an inheritance to somebody. Like, your Social Security is something that you're helping build your own budget around. So I have to say that comment just annoys me.
Well, he is right. When you die, you get nothing.
Yeah.
You can't take it with you. I'm sure Dave's going to try, but you can't.
Well, I mean, yeah, you can't take that with you, but that's not its purpose. That's not, it's not that kind of investment. It's just a sin.
The other thing he misses out is if you're married and your spouse survives you, they get spousal support until they die.
And if there are minor children involved, they do. And if you have a dependent with a disability, they can also
collect
this
it.
Is all things that have impacted my own personal world, actually. So
this idea that nothing comes out of it after you're dead is not true.
Not true, but it's personalized and situationally dependent.
It depends on the circumstance, but your estate also depends on your circumstance too. I mean, and how that gets divvied out. So that's just untrue.
I love that stance you paused him on. Look at that.
Yeah, I nailed this one. I know my stuff, even though I was wrong about every single point.
It's a great plan. If you run the numbers out on your Social Security, folks, you will discover it's about a negative 4% rate of return in your life.
That's if you assume a 12% rate of return in the market, which hasn't been a thing in the last, 40 years? In the last 40 years is an average, 8% return? So I don't know what he's talking about.
Figure out a way to talk everyone into having something removed from their check that they make a negative 4% on, and everybody.
Were you saying something?
I'd have to look again to make sure I'm completely accurate, but I think it gets higher if you extend it further to like 30 years. But then, even then, when I've done my numbers, because I extended a little bit further, it doesn't get beyond 10. So it still doesn't hit 12. Is my point.
Now, if you go back to like the 80s, things were really booming in the 80s, and they were pretty like 10. If you just look at the 80s and 90s alone, they were probably about 10 to 12 each, right? But if you look at the aughts, 2000 to 2000.
Well, yeah, what I'm saying though is even extending it, you're stretching to get to 12. Like when you extend it, you can solidly get to 10 to use as a number, but 12 is kind of a stretch.
Sure, if we're using the S&P 500 and you go historically through the whole lifetime of it, whatever that is, almost a century, right? Yeah, 10%, 10.6% was average over the history.
It's 10%. That is true, but not 12 is the point. The point is it's still not 12.
No, and not even
8, but 12 over the life is not it.
Not even that. It's just if you're an analyst, right, and you're trying to figure out what your benchmark is and what you want to beat, right, and what you want to do, would you go, let's look at the last century, or let's look at the last 10 to 20 years? Do you really think the market of the 1950s impacts the market of today that much? In any statistical measure, would I use that? No. I would probably be looking at what has been the trend over the last 10, 20, 30 years and compare those. I'm just telling you statistically.
Both.
Yeah, but it doesn't factor in, because if I just take the last 30 years, you're looking at 7.5 to 8% annual return on the market. Okay. But if I now take the last 70 years, now you're looking at 11%. But that means that the earlier 40 years were a lot higher than the last 30 that we've lived in. So am I going to assume that the previous 40 have some greater impact on the current 30? No. No, that's insane. It doesn't make sense statistically.
I also think that gets into kind of like something different that would need quite a bit more time and energy devoted to it, because it also gets into, you'd have to look sort of at context of, what was going on in certain eras to be drawing some historical comparisons as well.
Yeah, but you're in a completely different market. We're a service industry market now, not an industrial. And that's all changed since the 90s. So, you're talking about a pre-computer era.
Sure, I'm just thinking about
pre-cell phone. You talking about the 50s, international flight?
I'm thinking about world events and just sort of what's going on in the world, in terms of.
Sure, no, I understand.
I'm not really just thinking about,
I understand that. My point is if I'm going to sit here and say the statistical average of the market is 10.8%, historically that's true, right? That is not true for anybody under the age of 50. Anybody under the age of 50 who started investing when they were in their late teens or early 20s, in the last 30 years, it's been 7.5 to 8. That is not true. If I say historically it's true, yeah. If you're 140, historically, yeah, that's probably true.
I am 140.
There you go.
If
you're a vampire, that's true. That's my point. So when he sits there and does this, it's a nonsense number to be thrown out, because it's not the reality.
What's the difference between 7 or 8 and 10? It was that in any set of years as a measurement, 12 is kind of the outlier.
Oh, 12 is kind of a ridiculous.
Because when I look at it, I admittedly am somebody that likes to look at the longer range of time and see over a longer range of history what something has done. But even being somebody who likes to do that,
yeah,
I never 12 is never a number I arrive at. It just doesn't float that high. Is kind of my point.
Yeah, I might clip a lot of this, because we can get more into this in investments, and I'll show you the numbers, and it'll be a little easier to chew, because right now we're just sort of bantering about something we can't look at. Is that fair? I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying we can actually look at the numbers and then go back and forth about it. But yeah, but you're right. 12 is not reasonable.
My point really is, though, that I really do like looking at a longer set of numbers.
That's fine, but I'm just saying. But I agree, 12 is not reasonable.
But in either way you like, so whether you're looking at the shorter set of numbers or the longer set of numbers, 12 is not what's happening.
Right.
That's my point. My point is 12 is not a number that's happening.
Not statistically.
He's really reaching up. You know, like you can look over the lifetime of the S&P 500 and you can get to 10.
If you're looking on average.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
In any given year, there are years where you have 20 or 30% return, but that's not average.
Sure.
Yeah.
Average, you can get to 10. I haven't seen any set of it with the S&P 500 that gets you to 12. So I want to know what the hell he's looking at that gets him to 12.
I don't know.
Kind of
1960 to 1995, probably, something like that.
Like one specific set of years.
Yeah, you'd have to pick out a small chunk there somewhere.
Yeah.
When Dave hit puberty, his testicles dropped, and that's when history stopped.
And that was the 12% year.
That was the 12% year. But remember, he beats the market by 2, so he's doing 14.
With mutual funds.
Yep.
Body fights to keep it in place, and it becomes a political icon. Only in the United States government could they figure out a way to make that crap work. And you guys all just, mess with Social Security. Listen, I'll tell you what, here's a plan. I'm 58 years old. If you never made me pay again.
What was that?
I mean, that wasn't even English. Okay.
Well, no, so he's just. Hello?
No, I'm just saying what he said.
Keep everything.
Yeah, hang on one second. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. I got an echo there for a second. Okay. Give me a second. I'll clip that. That was weird. All right. Yeah, I don't know what that was. Echo. Maybe I won't clip it. That was kind of funny. All right. So essentially he's just ranting saying, well, it's stupid. It's a bad program, even though it's incredibly popular and 65 million people depend on it. Right. 10 million people would be out on the street without it. A lot of disabled people would be in really dire trouble. But yeah, horrible program. Horrible.
Yep, we hate that.
I've been paying into it almost 40 years. I've been paying into it 40 years. You can keep all that. I'll still come out ahead in the next 20 years. Not putting money in a stupid thing. Just putting that amount of money, the amount of money you robbed from me in my...
What is he talking about? Oh my God, I can't even. Just keep going.
Wait.
Like, what is he even? I don't know. I don't want to know what he's talking about. I don't know.
He's saying if I'd have just taken the money and invested it, that would have been better.
What he's saying.
But then he's saying that the Social Security tax is money you robbed from me, you stole from me, right? Yeah, I would have been.
If you never give it to me, I'm still going to come out ahead. That's not even saying he went and invested it on his own. He's just like saying like if I just like burn it or something, and I'm going to come out ahead. I don't understand.
No, he's saying if he had kept the money and invested it, he'd have come out ahead.
I don't think that's what he said.
Well, it depends.
Nonsense.
If you're living in his fantasy world of 12%, then yeah, he would have crushed this. But
okay, and I love that you're trying to make whatever the hell just came out of his mouth sound logical, but like he literally did not say that. He didn't even say anything that made sense.
No. What you need to understand is, and I'm just going to say this bluntly, I'm not saying it to be insulting or mean, Dave doesn't like poor people. He doesn't like lower income people. That's what it is. You should be able to save it and do it on your own. Because here's a program.
He's not going to lie. I wonder if I'm going to be blocked from him on Twitter by that.
I don't care. Well, I'm sorry about you. I mean, I don't care.
No. I have to say, I have not yet been offensive enough to have been blocked on Twitter by the Ramsey Solutions people, and I'm just wondering if I'm hitting that yet.
No, it's the same as when Paul Ryan was Mitt Romney's vice presidential pick. In the last several months of that campaign, they cut Paul Ryan. He couldn't talk to the press. They completely bunkered him. And the reason was because they said the problem with Paul is Paul hates lower income and poor people. He's that kind of conservative. Mitt Romney's more of like a moderate conservative. I still think Mitt Romney's terrible, but in comparison to Paul Ryan or Dave Ramsey, I would prefer Mitt Romney because Obamacare. Obama.
Whatever. Okay.
Well, but that's when you're voting.
It's a funny statement, sure.
Yeah, but when you're voting, you have to pick the lesser of the evils, right? I mean, if it's like.
But I mean, yeah, it's kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like, we got two guys, that we're voting for, and they're both genocidal maniacs, but one guy says, I want more death camps, and one guy says, I'm going to reduce the death camps, then I got to vote for the guy that reduces the death camps. I don't like either guy, but I got to go with what the lesser of two evils is, right?
Right.
If it was between Mitt Romney and Dave Ramsey, I'm like, I'll hold my nose and and vote for Mitt.
Oh, you froze, or I froze. We froze.
Yeah.
You
Sorry.
froze, we froze, I froze.
No, but I'd vote for Mitt if I had to. But my point is that's the problem here. This is what was so funny. The Social Security stuff. It's terrible. It's horrible. We got to get rid of it. Ignores the fact that millions of people would be destitute without it. And that it's the most reliable program. I mean, it's been incredibly reliable for over 80 years. It always pays out. People have lived better lives. We don't have old people dying in the streets. Right? At least not to the level we should have without it, right? It's the same thing with student loans. Doesn't like the student loan debt relief. Doesn't like student loans, period. Thinks we should just get rid of them. Well, then how are middle and lower class kids going to go to school? We would not have been able to go to school. He didn't want us to be educated, and I can see why now, because here I am spitting in his face. So, of course, he didn't want us to be educated, but he had no problem sending his 3 kids to school.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Anything that benefits, right, society as a whole in the bottom 50%, he doesn't like it because he believes in a hierarchy. He believes some people are better than others and should get better treatment. That's the conservative principle. That's what he believes. And that's what he's ranting about now. And the beauty of it is he's stuck in this bubble in his little 143-acre compound surrounded by his sycophants and everybody who loves him, that he can just spout nonsense and nobody bothers to correct him. Which is why this is so easy every time we do this. Every time we play him, he demonstrably says things that we know are wrong, can prove are wrong. He didn't do the basic math. He doesn't understand what he's talking about. But nobody there will tell him any different. Right? And we keep asking about that. It's like, dude, you've got hundreds of millions of dollars and 1,000 employees. You probably got 12 people with you there in the studio, and nobody can Google this? I can do it in 2 minutes with no budget. And he can't do it? Why? Because nobody will tell him otherwise. Nope, Dave, you're right. You're perfect. It's all great. And that's the beauty of all these clips we've done. I didn't go and watch the whole episode and clip these out. His people clipped these out and put them on YouTube without fact-checking or anything, thinking he looks smart. Nobody even bothered. I didn't clip this. This showed up in my feed. Because I subscribed to Dave Ramsey because I want to see what's going on. Yeah. I didn't have to hunt this down. This just showed up. They advertised this. And he's been wrong. The guy couldn't collect Social Security. No, the investment is not a safe investment. And it doesn't work the way he says it works. He says, like I said, it's funny because he says, every clip I see, he says something that's demonstrably stupid or wrong. And you can prove it every time. And yet they keep clipping him. I mean, they live in a bubble, I swear. No facts get in. Dave's the golden calf, and whatever comes out of his mouth is.
Like, clip? Seriously? Okay.
What was that?
I said, oh my God, is there more of this clip? Seriously?
Yeah, I want to get one more part out because this is really good.
All right, let's read the fuck
for
up.
this broken, screwed up mathematical disaster. See, that wasn't even sarcasm. That's just calling it out. I could take the amount of money I'm going to pay in where you're ripping me off, put that in a mutual fund, and I would have more income than I will have having paid in and gave up the whole 40 years. You guys can just keep that because your program's so freaking awesome. You can just keep it. That's the math. It sucks that bad. Only the federal government could talk you people into doing this, and you just like a bunch of sheep. You'll just take it out of my check. And it's just, golly, man. We all just love it. And God forbid that the Democrats and the Republicans ever tinker with this broken freaking system. Oh, your grandmother's going to starve. And it's going.
See? So he's all for cut Social Security. Say it again.
I feel like he was just like mooing at us. I don't know what was happening.
I know. Like I said, golden calf. Moo.
Boo.
He's a Christian. Hopefully he gets that reference. Oh, man. But anyway, so here's the deal. Only the United... Yeah. Only the United States, right, would do this, right? Only Americans are stupid enough to do social. See, he's all for cutting it. Everything we talked about earlier, he's all for Rick Scott and Ron Johnson. Let's cut it. Let's just get rid of it. It's terrible, right? Let the poor people be poor and starve. Let the lower income people die. Whatever. I don't care. Right? Let them eat cake. And only in America would we be stupid enough to do this, right? Let me throw one last fun fact out there. There are 195 sovereign countries in the world. Okay? On Earth today. Over 170 of them have a Social Security program. And most of them, well, not most of them, but a lot of them pay better than ours. And those countries have less poverty, less suicide, less crime. So, yeah, let's just get rid of it. Because only in America. So once again, he doesn't even know anything. He thinks that America is the only country that has Social Security. But almost every country does. He doesn't understand how it works, and yet he's going to lecture about it. And his team of producers, they'll clip it and put it on YouTube and go, yeah, see, Dave knows what he's talking about. And nobody wants to tell him any different because he's so freaking rich. So, anyway. Bullet point, vote in the election. Just be aware that this is on the ballot. Whether or not you get Social Security, which could affect whether or not you have to go homeless or work till you're 90. So think about it. Yeah. Well, I didn't have anything else. Do you have anything else, Lace? Or?
No. So if you want to find us, you can check out my material at mysensewithsense.com. You can find blog posts as well as information about courses and upcoming workshops. You can also write into myself or either of us with clips, information about courses. Mm-hmm. You want us to watch something in particular, you have a topic or a question you want us to address. And Duncan, how can they get a hold of us there?
Our email's below. It's gossipfinancead@outlook.com. And thanks for joining us. And thank you again. Good work, Lacey.
Click and subscribe.
Click and subscribe or else. All right.